Hi, and welcome back to Glassbox writing automated WebDriver tests. I've had a couple of requests asking that I do a WebDriver video tutorial on managing parameters and variables in tests. So this video is dedicated to you. If you sent me a request, this video is completely dedicated to you. So today we are going to have a look at managing parameters through property files requested by you. We will look at how to use a parameter in a test and how to manage that property or parameter outside of a test. So what is a property, or more commonly known as a variable in a test? Well, let's take a look at a test that I've already written to further explain. So here we have a test where all we're doing is we're just going to populate the contact form on the test. A quick overview of what the current framework has. It only has two classes. The first is the abstract test driver, which just has a before and an after method just to help me manage my driver instances. Then we have a test which extends from that test driver so that the before and after method are effectively written for us. And inside the contact form test class, all I'm doing is at first navigating to the zoo site. I'm then clicking on the contact link. I'm then filling in the 4 fields on the contact form. I'm then clicking on the submit button, and then I'm checking to see that a page contains a paragraph tag with this message. So if we were to manually go through this user journey, it would be navigating to this particular site, then clicking on contact, then filling in this form, then clicking the send button, and then checking for this message. That's it. So if we quickly just run this just to see what happens. So the browser is opened, we filled in the form, and then the button was pressed and the web browser automatically closed because of the way we defined our after method. But ultimately the important thing is that the test passed. Fantastic. Now, in terms of managing, say, these values here, so here I've given it a name value for which we are searching for by name, and here we're passing in a value to the send keys method to actually write something into the form. Now if you have, let's just say, maybe 2 or 3 tests which all extend from this abstract test driver, and let's just say you want to pass in a different value, there's not too much of an overhead to go and change that value in the test. It's relatively small. However, let's just say you've got 100 different tests and all of the tests use this exact same line of code. You'd have to go in and change it in every single test. More kind of on the frustrating side is that, let's just say the identifier for that field, so in this case we're using .name to identify the field. Let's just say the name of that identifier or the value of that name attribute changes to something else. You'd have to go into every single test and change it. Now this can be quite naturally very frustrating, but more importantly this will take a lot of time, and one of the few things you don't have as an automated tester is time, because you're reliant on others to write tests which are robust, which are susceptible to change, which you can maintain over time really quickly. So I have a solution that I apply to such occasions, and that is to use a properties file and then a properties manager class to help manage my properties over time. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a properties file. So you go new file, and I'm going to call my properties file well, parameters dot properties. So the extension of this file is called .properties. So finish that. For those who don't know what a properties file is, it's effectively a key value pair in essence. Actually, more strictly speaking, it's more like a set of data where you have a value on one side, a unique value on the left side with the value assigned to it on the right side. So it's like saying the identifier and then the value for the identifier, if you like. So this is the identifier and this is the value for the identifier. And notice that in our properties file, the identifier is written in a black colored text, while the value identifier is written in a blue colored text, just to distinguish that these are two different things and not the same. So I hope you understand what the relationship between these two are. So if we just get rid of that, what I would like to do is write the values I need in a properties file and then use that value in the test. Right. So I know that I need these particular values here. So this name underscore field is directly being picked up from the contact form. So if we just quickly go to the contact form and just have a look at that page source, or rather just inspect this element. So it's this value here, this name attribute and its value that's been picked up by WebDriver. So as opposed to providing it, or rather hard coding in the test, what I would like to do is write it in this properties here instead and give it the same value, just for the sake of argument. The next thing I want to do is take this as well and give this a value as well. So again, this is the value I want. So what I will do is I'm just gonna call this name underscore value and then give this a value of just say name test, for instance. So my ultimate goal is to use these values in my test as opposed to these hard coded values. So how does one get the values out of a properties file and then into, say, this particular test? Well, the way we're going to do it is write a property manager class to pick out properties from a properties file and then insert it somewhere else. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new class under my source directory. I'm going to call it property manager, and I'm going to put it in a brand new package called util. Finish that. Right. So I now have a property manager class, and what I'm going to do is first I'm just going to get the property into the property manager class, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to write a quick method called public. Let's make it void. We don't really want it to return anything. And I'm going to call it generate property. Okay. So the first thing you need to do in order to actually use a property class is use the properties object that Java provides. So I'm just going to say properties prop is equal to new properties. Then I need to use an input stream class. Now let me explain what the input stream class is. I'm just going to import the library in first. Okay. So the input stream class is just used to provide bytes of data to Java in a more easy to manage form, and I'm not going to go into depths of what it can be used for, because it can be used for many things, but in this case all we're going to use the input stream class is to provide a path to our properties file so that we can load it in. So the next thing we need to do is actually get the value of our properties file and put it in our input variable here. So we need to do this inside a try and catch, because an IO exception can be thrown when it comes to trying to handle an input path. So I'm just going to say input is equal to new file input stream, and here I'm going to give the path to the file. So we know it's under source and then the file itself is called parameters dot properties, and again I'm going to input in the necessary libraries. The next thing I want to do is now load this input properties file now, since the property file is inside our input stream, and now load this input stream into our properties variable. And to do this, all we do is say prop load input. So now our properties file is effectively loaded inside our prop. So now we can actually access these values here using our properties variable. So for instance, we can do something like this. We can say prop get object, and then you provide the name of the object. So I would like to get this field value here, for example. If I just do this line of code here now, or in particular this get method, returns a string. So when I say prop get name underscore field, this will actually return this particular value. Now to actually use this value outside of this class, I need to somehow provide that access to outside classes as well. The way I'm going to do that is to just declare a public string, and in this case I'm going to call it contact form name field, and just going to say it's equal to nothing for the moment. And then in here I'm just going to say that particular string is now equal to this field here, dot to string. So now what we're saying is, whatever the value of this name underscore field is, put that value in this string variable here. So I'm going to do the same thing for our actual value for the name field that we're trying to input. So I'm going to say contact name value. I'm just going to copy this so that I can save a little bit of time. And this time we're going to get the name value and put it in here. So now what we're doing is we're saying exactly the same thing, but this time we're saying contact name value will contain the value of this particular key, whatever it has in our properties file. So in essence what we're saying is name test will be contained in name in contact name value. So we just need to clean off this try catch with a catch, and we're going to catch a IO exception. Just give it an E, and all we're going to say is print stack. So the reason why we might get an IO exception is in our code, if it doesn't find this properties file, this will throw an IO exception. It will effectively just throw an exception saying file not found on this particular path. So let's just save that. So now we have our property manager class ready to be used. So when we instantiate this class and call this method, what will happen is these properties, which are public, which means whatever class uses this will have access directly to this. This is bad practice. You shouldn't have strings with public access. You should have strings or any variables, any member variables in a class. You should always have them private with method access for good OOP practices. But we're just going to skip that phase for the moment, and we're going to provide direct access to these variables after running the generate property. And what should happen is these variables, string variables, would have been populated with a value inside our properties file. So now what we need to do is instantiate this and use it in our test. So if we go back, we can quite easily instantiate the properties here, but again, doing that I find bad practice because we're trying to use some information in a test that doesn't belong in a test. So where else can we use it? Well, we can actually use it in the abstract test class. What we can do here is, because our test extends from this abstract test driver, we can just create a property manager variable here declare it, instantiate it, call the generate method, and by proxy of this abstract test driver we should be able to use the values in our test. So let's do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just say protected property manager, and I'm going to call this property. And then in my before method I'm just going to say property is equal to new property manager. Let's just import in the classes, and then I'm just going to say property dot generate property. Right. So this would have now generated the necessary properties. So now if we go in our test, we can get rid of these variables here, and because we're inheriting the abstract test driver, we should be able to directly use those variables in our test. So let's do that. So we call it property dot, and the first value we want is the contact form name field, and then in here we want to say property and then the value. So let's just do that just so we can see it and format it. Okay. So now notice, if you have a look at the difference between, say, this line of code where we are hard coding in the values, and this line of code, which again we are still hard coding in the values, but the values are being grabbed from this properties file, it gives us a little bit more freedom to change these values without having to touch the test. So let's just run this and see what happens. With some good luck, this should pass first time. Perfect. So you passed. Fantastic. That's exactly what we were looking for. In our test, it really hasn't made a difference in how it runs or how long it takes to run. The focus wasn't that. The focus was to extract hard-coded information somewhere else and use it there. So let's just take a moment to think about what we've just done. Here we're using hard-coded values, which means if we have 2 or 3 tests, we can just go in and change those hard-coded values in maybe 2 or 3 different tests. That's fine. If we have 100 different tests and we need to change that value, that poses 2 problems. The first problem is you have 100 different tests, so you need to go and change it in potentially 100 different places. Another permutation of that is, what if your 100 different tests are not identical in any way? That means when you open up a test, you also need to fish for this line of code. This code could be, it could exist in different forms, in different places, in different methods. It could exist in different abstract classes or different base classes. You can kind of see where this is going quite easily. But if you were to say always use a properties file to fish for your property from just one source, then no matter how many tests you have, if you have nth number of tests, you only come and you change it in one place. So if we now did this, say I will subscribe to this channel, for instance, if we just said something like this, and if we now run the test, there you go. It put it in the value, or rather it inserted the value we placed in the parameters file, not from somewhere else. So this is a mechanics that I usually employ to my WebDriver frameworks for names and values which I know I'll be using sparingly across many different tests, which I know could possibly change. Because if they change, to me it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. I go in and I change it in one place, and the change is automatically inherited to every place that it needs to be inherited. I don't even need to go and fish for it. It's just done for me. It's house cleaning that's taken care for me. On my end, there's almost no effort. So this is the mechanics I use to implement what I think is, at the very least, a really good basic structure of managing your properties across any number of tests, where the number of changes you have to make doesn't matter. is the absolute minimal effort, in that you change it in only one place and the change is done across everywhere without you having to think about it too much. So this was a video that was requested by a couple of you, and I hope this kind of answers your burning question of how do you manage properties and variables in your test. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my video and find they bring some new knowledge or insight into writing WebDriver tests, then please subscribe and rate. If you have any video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.